I think Texas has a
Good evening,
potential
Earth.
to be
This is
an
Adam Sturch
extremely
broadcasting
strategic
from the
and
Mushroom
impactful
Mansion,
state,
Taos, New Mexico,
a state where
working
demographic
on
change
oil
is
painting
happening,
Angel Fire.
just not yet. And
Alright,
so
I
I think
mixed up
that
some very
analyzing the
thin
numbers
yellow glaze
as the dust settles on the race, we'll be able to
to
really be able to
loosen
tell where
and
we're
start
at.
deepening
And
some of
then
the lighter whites. And then I've mixed up some magenta and some violet and some alizarin crimson.
So there's that.
And if you could, we're talking to you in Phoenix, Arizona, Marisa. If you could talk about what the situation there is, what results you've seen coming in now, however tentative, and about the propositions that are on the ballot this year, starting with Proposition 314. If you could explain what that is.
Well, so far there's been over 2.2 million votes cast by mail. It's a state where a vast amount of people vote by mail, so we should be getting results, but we don't really know yet. There has been a slew of ballot initiatives, including Proposition 314, which is sort of a combination between Arizona's SB 1070, Arizona's anti-immigrant law over a decade ago, and SB 4, which is one of the more recent anti-immigrant laws coming out of Texas by Governor Abbott. So it's a really nasty combination of the two. There's also Proposition 139, taking on the abortion ban, which I think a lot of us are looking at, and we hope that will succeed. And then the race for Senate with Ruben Gallego looks positive. But it has felt like the race at the top of the ticket, and like many other states across the country, it's razor thin, and it's going to be a coin flip. So it's still...
Marisa, the latest numbers we have on that, Congressmember Gallego, 53%, Lake 45%, with 48% reporting, almost half reporting. If you can talk about what were the major issues in this race, and talk about what could be, although it's too early to say, the significance of a Gallego victory.
That's tracking the polling. Gallego was polling higher than Harris in the state, so my sense is that will likely hold. Especially the early vote had actually a big chunk of GOP voters and independent voters. It was actually more than Democrats, so that looks very, very promising for Senator Gallegos. I think that where it's a departure from Kirsten Sinema. I think it will remain to be seen how much of an advocate and an ally Senator, if he is Senator, Gallegos will be. But nevertheless, it's a bright spot considering what we're facing in the federal landscape with respect to control of Congress. It's one of the seats that needed to be won, and I hope that we're able to deliver that here in Arizona.
Marisa, if you could say about Proposition 139 on abortion, if you could say what precisely that measure is and where you see it going, why it's so important in Arizona.
Well, Arizona was one of the states that banned abortion following the Supreme Court decision, so this was an effort by advocates, women here in the state, like many other states, to try to actually create an amendment in the Constitution, in the state Constitution, to protect the right to an abortion. It has been one of the campaigns that has catalyzed and drawn in many, many people, and I think it's important to just say, we're looking at a very close race. There's some of us who have been through this before. It's a nauseous optimism. There's so many people that are joining and doing political work for the first time. And so I think that it's important to honor that and the work that people have done. And that certainly has been a campaign that has drawn thousands of women across Arizona who have been alarmed at the actions taken at the state legislature.
There are 10 states that have abortion referendum in this election. Florida has gone down. It actually won a majority of the vote, but not the supermajority that was needed, that was imposed on a ballot initiative passing in Florida. And New York, the #1 initiative, has passed. So that's very significant in Arizona. And I wanted to go back to what I believe is the only amendment around immigration in the country. And if you can talk more specifically about that initiative, Proposition the proposition that involves criminalizing people who are crossing the Arizona-Mexico border without authorization and allowing local law enforcement to arrest and deport migrants.
It's devolving what has been a civil federal issue. It's continuing the trend that Arizona in many ways started over a decade ago of devolving something that is federal to the state level, actually empowering the states to enforce federal immigration law by making it a state law. It is a new Jim Crow in many ways, where legislatures, governors and different advocates are creating more and more ways to come after immigrants and to be able to embolden state officials and local law enforcement to enforce federal immigration law. It's and it's unfortunate. I think that there has been I think that it's been a difficult time on immigration. The discourse at the top of at the presidential race has not necessarily shown real contrast. And so likely this, I haven't seen recent polling on this particular initiative, but very likely it's going to go to the courts. But this is just a continued trend of governors and state legislatures taking immigration enforcement into their own hands in the absence of any action at the federal level. And we continue to posit that it is almost 40 years since there has been legalization in this country, and this country would not run without the efforts, labor, and contributions of immigrant people, and it's about time that there be respect and dignity for the people who live, work, and are part of our communities. So this initiative, like Arizona has often done, the way that we're seeing in Texas is taking us in the wrong direction, and we'll have I think an ongoing fight on our hands following the outcome of the election.
And back on the abortion measure, the ballot measure, it's leading 63.2% with more than 1 million votes. And no is 36.8 at 635,000. So this is very significant. AP is reporting that the abortion ballot measure that so many worked for so long to get on the Arizona ballot is at this point 63 to 36. It does look like it's going to pass, Marissa.
It's great news, and I think it's potentially foreshadowing. We shouldn't have to be fighting for these basic rights in 2024. And that is, I think, the threat, and has been a threat of a Trump presidency and the ongoing MAGA movement. And when I think about what happens in this election, I think of Latinos in my home state of Arizona. My hope is that we remember that this is the state that in many ways foreshadowed MAGA. This was a state that took on looking to abolish ethnic studies, that took on to take away voting rights, that banned abortion. I hope that we remember that. And beyond that, I hope that we actually project that the status quo, middle of the road, like we can beat the likes of Carrie Lake, but we don't just have to go middle of the road, which I think a lot of people are tired of status quo policies that aren't actually making relevant impact in our lives. And so I think while it is a huge victory, and it's also labor that we shouldn't have to be doing in 2024, and thus that's the situation we're facing. But nevertheless, it's a victory, and my hat goes off to the folks that work so hard. It clearly was an issue that is unpopular here and across the country.
Well, Marissa Franco, we want to thank you so much for being with us, Director and co-founder of Mi Gente, that national digital organizing hub for Latinx and Chicanx communities. This is Democracy Now!, and we are more than halfway through our 4-hour special on this election night, this historic election, and we'll be summarizing for you everything we know as we go along the way, from the presidential race to congressional and Senate races, the balance of the Senate and the House, and also we'll be talking about ballot initiatives like we're talking about the ones around abortion. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh. The latest news out of Delaware, Democrat Sarah McBride has been elected the first openly transgender Congress member in U.S. history, defeating Republican John Whalen. She's vowed to address criminal justice, reform, abortion rights, gun violence, and more. We're now joined by Amara Jones, who is the founder and CEO of Translash Media and host of its investigative podcast, The Anti-Trans Hate Machine. Her new piece for Newsweek is headlined, "What's at Stake for Trans People in This Election?" Welcome back to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us, Amara. Start off with this Sarah McBride making history, winning the congressional seat, the only congressional seat in Delaware.
Thank you for having me on during this marathon tonight. Look, I think that Sarah made history and shows quite clearly that candidates matter. I think that we have to remember that aside from being a trans candidate, that Sarah made history as the first trans person to ever address a major political convention. Additionally, Sarah is just a terrific political talent in her own right. Made history as the first trans state senator from anywhere in the United States, and is now making history again tonight. Very close ties to the Biden family, understands the issues in her state, worked for Beau Biden. And so I think that, not only is Sarah a great political talent, as I said, storied in politics, but also is attached to a really powerful political family for all the right reasons. So I think, again, candidates matter, and that's what we saw tonight. And it was well fought and well earned.
And so, Imara, if you could, you've been sitting with us as we've been reporting, if you could respond to the results that have come in so far, and whether you're surprised at how, at least at the moment, it appears that the race is extremely close.
My prediction to anyone who would listen all year was that it was Kamala, it was going to be a very tight race, that Vice President Harris could very well eke it out, but it would be eking it out. So I think that the race has gone back to where I always thought that it was going to be, and I think we're having the race that was always predicted. And so I've gotten very nervous emails and texts throughout the night. I was happy to hear from Eugene, who is on the ground, who mentioned that some of his sources are going silent, but I think that it's because people are probably digging into the numbers, because it's going to be very tight. So we may not know tonight, and we may not know for a couple of days. And so I think we just have to steel ourselves for that. So I'm not surprised. And look, I think that one of the things that when I was on recently is that I mentioned that the way that anti-trans issues are deployed is in tight races, and so this lends credence to why they were deploying anti-trans issues, because they read the same poll numbers.
And what's at stake for the transgender community? What do you think the most important issues are?
I mean, I think that what makes this different, I wish that we could talk about, what happens to trans healthcare or trans housing or trans, overall healthcare issues, like, for any other standard group of people in the United States. But I really do think that in this race, the issues for trans people are existential. There is a candidate in the race, Donald Trump, who, as a part of his closing argument last night, launched into an anti-trans screed. They also dropped a new ad today, attacking Aman Khalif for being trans and participating in the Olympics. There's new ad dollar assessments that showed that they've spent north of $100 million on these ads over the past month, and so I think that we are teeing up trans people to be one of the major targets in the trans administration, and for him, a part of the group that he's identified or implied would be a part of his day one purge.
I mean, the amount, I don't know if people understand the tens of millions of dollars that were poured into ads. I mean, you'd see them in the middle of football games, you'd see them in baseball games. I want to turn to an ad that the Trump campaign ran, the first ever presidential campaign ad on the topic and the Senate Leadership Fund, backed by Mitch McConnell, running ads in key Senate races, swing states during major football games.
Kamala was the first to help pay for a prisoner's sex change.
The power that I had, I used it in a way that was about pushing for the movement, frankly, and the agenda.
Kamala's agenda is they, them, not you.
But Brown voted multiple times to allow transgender biological males to participate in girls' sports.
Baldwin supported providing puberty blockers and sex change surgeries to minor children. She even supports forcing Wisconsin women's domestic violence shelters to admit biological men who claim to identify as women.
So, how did the Democrats respond to these attacks? And where does that leave you? Where does it leave humanity after this election?
Well, the Democrats responded, as I have characterized it, most charitably as cautiously and in a measured way, right? First of all, they didn't respond to the ads at all. There was no set of ads that they could have run, for instance, with trans kids in them, showing the humanity of those families and how those families are being targeted. There are lots of ways, that you can respond that hold up to your values, but also try to appeal to people who may not necessarily be on your side, and politicians know how to do that. Moreover, they had over a year to prepare for these attacks. I mean, everyone knew that there was going to be a certain point where this was going to be the focus. So there wasn't really a response on the ads. And then in the comments by the vice president, she was measured in what she said. And so there hasn't really been a full-throated or politically focused response from the Democrats, and I think that it's because they made a bid for the Haley voter as a way to try and get them over kind of the 48-49 hump to 50 plus 1. And they know that those voters who supported Ambassador Haley are not pro-trans, because Ambassador Haley herself made being anti-trans a key argument for her campaign. It was in her first speech out of the gate. It was in her stump speech everywhere. And so I think that they thought that in order to appeal to those voters, that they had to be more careful than I actually think that the vice president is herself personally. I mean, she's gotten up in front of juries and argued for and about the humanity of trans people in some very focused ways. So I think that this is something that she knows how to do. I think that there was just some reticence given who they decided to target to get them over the hump.
M.R. Jones, I want to thank you very much for coming in here today. What are you looking at as we wrap up as the way forward? And what will you be advising politicians? Will you be running yourself? I mean, you actually came out of the Clinton White House.
Yeah, no. The answer is no. Once you cross into journalism, that's it. So that's too late. I think where I am looking forward in terms of what comes next, Amy, is kind of where you ended your last question, which is what does this mean? I think the fact that we have had it looks like more than $100 million worth of ads dropped against trans people means that the atmosphere may have soured in a way that means that there's a lot of work to do, and that by not actually coming up with ways to respond that center the humanity of trans people, that there's actually been a large political opening that's been created through which authoritarians and extremists are driving a truck. And I think that vulnerability has only been exposed, and that danger has only been heightened by this campaign. And so the danger for trans people and the danger for democracy that's being exploited by people who are anti-democratic using trans people, that's not going anywhere tonight. And these results will not give anyone comfort, even if, as I've said, Vice President Harris ekes it out tonight.
I want to thank you so much for being with us, Amara Jones, founder and CEO of Translash Media. Check out the podcast, The Anti-Trans Hate Machine. Amara's new piece for Newsweek is headlined, "What's at Stake for Trans People in This Election?" This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, War, Peace, and the Presidency. I'm Amy Goodman with Noreen Sheikh.
We turn now to the battleground state of Michigan, where the presidential race is too close to call. With 25% of votes counted, Donald Trump has a narrow lead. We're joined now in Dearborn, Michigan by Linda Sarsour, a Palestinian-American Muslim organizer, author of We Are Not Here to Be Bystanders, and co-founder of Empower Action Fund. Welcome back to Democracy Now!, Linda Sarsour. If you could describe the scene there in Dearborn, you've been at an election party with other Arab Americans. What are you hearing?
I am here at a wonderful Dearborn establishment called the Canteen, which is hosting a watch party. There are dozens of Arab American and Muslim American organizers that are here. You know, it's hard to tell where people are. People are watching the results coming in. It seems so far, at least as of now, that Donald Trump is leading in this election. Obviously, Michigan has not fully reported their numbers, so that, of course, is the most concern to the people that are here to see what happens in the state of Michigan.
I just want to let people know the latest news. Despite the fact that the very well-respected Des Moines Register poll indicated that Kamala Harris was up 3 points, it looks like President Trump has trumped Harris in Iowa and has won the state of Iowa. Also, just to let people know, you have the abortion initiative that looks like it has passed in Arizona. Well, it is also passed in New York. It has gone down, a different abortion initiative, but gone down in Florida. And Colorado has just voted to enshrine abortion rights. Just some of the latest news as we go through this 4-hour special. So, Linda Sarsour, if you can talk about the Arab American and Muslim vote in Michigan and how both Trump and Harris have appealed to or not appealed to the hundreds of thousands of voters in Michigan who are Arab American or Muslim.
I have been organizing in Michigan for the last few months, and today I was at polling sites across south end of Dearborn, around eastern Dearborn, and I saw a high voter turnout. I saw lines that I hadn't actually seen before in Dearborn. The sentiment is very mixed on the ground. The community is not monolithic. There were some people who were willing to share as they came out of polling sites who they voted for. Some did disclose that they did vote for a third party. Many for Jill Stein, also some for Dr. Cornel West. There were a very small minority of people that did disclose that they voted for Donald Trump. And yes, there were some, a small few that I was able to talk to that did say that they voted for Kamala Harris more so because they did not want to see another Donald Trump presidency. So the sentiment is mixed here, but what's beautiful is that many people were going for down ballot races. There were many Arab American, Muslim Americans on the down ballots, especially things like school board, judges. So the turnout is there, but I think the community here is still devastated. Many people here are voting around Gaza. That is the motivating issue that is bringing them to the polls. So we're just watching this election, Amy. I can't believe it's this close. That's the sentiment here. Why is this election so close? Why is there a competition between Kamala and Donald Trump at this time in 2024? So again, we're like everybody else around the country. We're waiting to see what the final results are.
And what is your sense, Linda? What are you hearing? Why is the race so close?
I think that there have been miscalculations that have happened across the board. I think that this idea that Gaza is not a central issue to many voters across the country, including anti-war voters, progressives, young people, students across the country, and of course Arab American, Muslim American, and Palestinian American voters who happen to find themselves highly concentrated in states like Michigan.
All right, well, that's about all I'm going to be able to do for the moment on this.
And that's one. Second,
Got some
people like Donald Trump were leveraging
more layering
the trauma
happening.
that our community
Got my
has
strap hung on my tripod. There we go.
All
Alright, it's a little bit glary on that side, but I kind of like this horse-ish figure. merging here. Maybe he has a curly unicorn. I don't know. But anyway, lots of anthropomorphizing of some of these more abstracted shapes now happening. It's quite a bit of fun. And that sets it up for the next layer. I would like quite a few layers in this sky. I want it to be very swirling and psychedelic. So a little bit more before I start on the foreground. But that's it for the moment. Got to set this up and let it dry until the next phase. Have a good night, Earth. That's Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting Angel Fire.